What if I told you there's an invisible force shaping your life? A silent puppeteer pulling strings you didn't even know existed? Let's call this force the poor me. And chances are it's been with you longer than you realize. And not only has it been with you, but it overtook your very life. It has become your torturer, your master, your vampire, your god. We've all felt like victims at some point. But for some, this feeling isn't just an occasional visitor, it's a permanent resident. Today, we're diving deep into the poor me, how it's planted, how it grows, and most importantly, how it can strangle the life out of our true potential. Stage 1. The implementation. It all begins in childhood. Picture a young mind, like a sponge, soaking up the world around it. Now imagine that world keeps saying, "You can't. You're not good enough. Don't even try." These messages don't always come in words. Sometimes it's a sigh, a smirk, a dismissive wave of the hand, or the absence of celebration when you achieve something. Primary caretakers, parents, guardians, even teachers, can unknowingly plant the seeds of poor me. "Oh, poor thing, you'll never be able to do that." It sounds caring, doesn't it? But hidden in that sympathy is a poison, the belief that you are somehow less than. Children are incredibly perceptive, not just to what is said, but to the unspoken currents that flow around them. They are emotional sponges, absorbing not only information, but also the very essence of how they are perceived and valued. In these formative moments, the groundwork for poor me can be laid through a myriad of messages, both overt and subtle. Direct discouragement isn't the only culprit. Often it's the insidious power of comparison that begins to erode self-worth. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" A parent might sigh, or "Look how well Tommy did it." These words, even when well-intentioned, can imply that the child is lacking, that their own efforts and achievements are somehow insufficient against the backdrop of others' successes. Then there's overprotection, that double-edged sword born out of love yet cutting deep into a child's sense of capability. "Let me do that for you," or "You might hurt yourself," a caregiver says, swooping in to avert imagined disaster. While the intention is to shelter, the message received can be stark. You are incapable, fragile, always in need of rescue. In darker corners lurks emotional manipulation, where a child's worth becomes entangled with others' emotions. "You're making mommy sad by not being good at this," or "If you really loved me, you'd do better." Here, the child learns the heavy and misplaced burden that they are responsible for any negative feelings in those around them. Often, this isn't where the story begins. Parents who instill victimhood were frequently raised with it themselves, part of a generational pattern as tenacious as it is tragic. "Life is hard," they might say, or "people like us don't get breaks." These deeply ingrained beliefs get passed down, a toxic inheritance that colors the lens through which the next generation will view their potential. Poor me gets thus modeled to the child. It's the influencer in the child's mind. And talking about influencers, we mustn't forget that beyond the home, children encounter narratives about their potential based on gender, race, class, or ability. "Girls aren't good at math," society whispers. "People from this neighborhood don't go to college," community stereotypes reinforce. These broader messages can dovetail with individual doubts, cementing limitations that were never innate. The tragedy is that most parents, teachers, and caregivers who sow these seeds, in most cases do so unintentionally. They may believe they're being realistic, protective, or even motivating. But for the child, each of these interactions is a brick in the foundation of their self-concept. And here's the crucial point. Children, in their beautiful adaptive resilience, will often contort themselves to fit the narrative they're given. If the world keeps saying implicitly or explicitly, "You are less than a," the developing psyche will conclude, "Then less than is what I must be." This is how the implementation of poor me begins, not with a bang, but with 1,000 whispers. Each sigh, each doubtful glance, each "why bother" becomes part of an insidious lullaby, singing the child into a sleep where dreams are small and "I can't" is the first thought upon waking. The real danger of this stage is its subtlety. A child given nothing but praise can develop other issues, but at least those are often visible. The poor me, in contrast, can take root without anyone noticing, least of all the child themselves. It becomes the water they swim in, unquestioned because it's all they've ever known. And so, invisibly, the stage is set. The child, armored in vulnerability and crowned with doubt, steps out into a world that seems designed to confirm their lesser status. Stage 2. Internalization. The human brain is wired for efficiency. Given a choice between fighting a persistent narrative or accepting it, guess which path it often chooses? That's right, the path of least resistance. So when the world keeps echoing, "Poor you," the mind starts to whisper back, "Poor me." It becomes more than a thought, it becomes an identity. I can only exist as a victim. If I dare to be happy, I'll upset others or invite disaster. The poor me isn't just internalized, it becomes the lens through which all of life is viewed, all of life. From how we brush our teeth to how we deal with the most complex aspects of our existence. This is where poor me transforms from a mindset into an addiction. Like any dependence, it demands to be fed and fed and fed again. We find ourselves drawn to people and situations that mirror our pain, that confirm our suspicions about our lesser status. Why? Because in the twisted logic of poor me, even negative certainty feels better than the unknown territory of hope. But here's where the true insidiousness of poor me reveals itself, where its power as an addiction becomes undeniable. Even when poor me is confronted with goodness, with health, with genuine care, it recoils, it twists, it transmutes. This right here is poor me mainlining its drug of choice, negative meaning. It will contort the most benign, even the most benevolent of interactions to extract its fix. A friend doesn't call back immediately, abandoned. A date ends without a kiss, unlovable. A moment of silence in conversation. They must be bored by me. The tragic irony is that the more poor me twists reality to fit its narrative, the more isolated the individual becomes, and the more proof they get that all life is about being a victim. Positive relationships wither under constant misinterpretation. Opportunities for growth are recast as setups for failure. The addiction demands that all data, all human interaction, all life experience be filtered into a story of victimhood. And like any addict, the poor me doesn't just passively receive, it actively seeks. It will rifle through conversations, hunting for subtext that isn't there. It will revisit past hurts, not to heal them, but to reaffirm them. It will even create scenarios like picking fights, self-sabotaging, that ensure a fresh supply of proof that the world is against it, that it is forever the victim, never the victor. This is the pernicious power of poor me as an addiction. Not only does it surround itself with dealers who validate its skewed reality, but it becomes its own most reliable supplier. In a world that offers complex, neutral, even positive input, poor me labors tirelessly to distill it down to the only tonic it trusts, victimhood, and all that while asking relentlessly and sometimes dramatically, why me? When is this going to end? Why am I being punished? The room may be full of mirrors offering true reflections, but poor me will crawl on hands and knees to the one warped glass that shows what it expects to see. We're not dealing with a mindset that occasionally slips into negativity, or a mood that can be coaxed into seeing the bright side. No, poor me is a fortress. Walls thick, drawbridge up, archers at the ready to shoot down any notion that contradicts its fundamental tenet. A victim can't win and can't be happy. This isn't just a belief for poor me, it's the bedrock of existence, the very air it breathes. To suggest otherwise isn't just met with skepticism, but with a complete inability to compute. Positive evidence doesn't just get dismissed, it gets invisibilized, as if written in an ink that poor me's eyes are simply incapable of perceiving. When we say poor me has no access to contradictory information, we're not speaking figuratively. The neural pathways, the grooves of thought have become so deep, so worn by constant use, that traveling them is no longer a choice but an inevitability. It's as though poor me's mind is a record player with only one track, the needle unable to find, let alone play, any other song but "You are a victim, you cannot succeed." Every time poor me says I, every utterance of me or myself, what's really being said is poor me, victim me, miserable me. It's a prison locking every aspect of identity into this diminished state. I want to be happy, they might say, the words falling from their lips like a wish cast into a dry well. But peel back the layers of that statement, and you'll hear the true voice beneath, insidious, persistent poor me, twisting even the most fundamental human desire into sustenance for its narrative. You see, for poor me, happiness isn't just elusive, it's indigestible. It's not part of the nutrition pyramid that keeps poor me's ecosystem thriving, or it won't be called poor me. No, happiness is more akin to an allergen, a foreign substance that, should it enter poor me's system, risks triggering a full-blown existential anaphylaxis. Happiness, oh no, that's not for me, I somehow can't digest that. Poor me demurs, eyeing the concept like a dish it knows will bring nothing but intestinal distress. That's a delicacy reserved for other people's palates. The worthy, the lucky, the unvictimized. Oh, how I wish I could have that too. In poor me's dietary restrictions, joy is the ultimate forbidden fruit, not just off limits, but fundamentally incompatible with its very being. What poor me truly craves, what it pushes its plate toward again and again, is the bitter nectar of confirmation bias. Each disappointment is a sip, each perceived slight a swallow, all of it going down with the familiar burn of, see, you are a victim. Why such an appetite for anguish? Because suffering isn't just familiar to poor me, it's fortifying. It reinforces the very scaffolding that holds poor me upright. Every letdown is another brick in the wall. But happiness, true, unbridled joy, that's not just unappealing to poor me, it's downright dangerous. Because genuine happiness carries with it the risk of cracking poor me's foundation. One real smile, one moment of unadulterated gratitude, and the whole precarious structure could come tumbling down. This is poor me's version of a mortal threat. So poor me recoils, it pushes away the plate. No, it insists, turning back to the familiar, the anticipated pain. This is what I know, this is what I can trust, this is what keeps me, me. And so the bitter feast continues. Poor me gorges itself on could-have-beens and if-onlys, and told-you-sos and never-for-me's, all to avoid the one morsel that threatens to dismantle everything. The simple, powerful realization that maybe, just maybe, a better life is possible. In this, we see poor me's tragedy laid bare. Poor me doesn't just turn from joy, it quarantines against it, because to let it in, truly in, would be to risk the very fabric of poor me unraveling one golden thread at a time. The insidious, deeply unconscious genius of poor me is how it masquerades as a protector, a realist. I'm just preparing you for inevitable letdown, it soothes. Why reach for joy when pain is guaranteed? Let's stay here, where at least we know the script. And so every experience, every interaction becomes filtered through this lens, a lens so deeply tinted that sunlight itself would look like dusk. A compliment, a veiled insult, an opportunity, a setup for failure, a moment of genuine connection. Just wait, they'll leave eventually, they always do. This isn't pessimism. This isn't even fatalism. This is poor me functioning exactly as it's designed to, as a self-perpetuating system that will only and always assess life through the victim's vantage point. Because to do otherwise, to even consider another perspective, would be to threaten poor me's very existence. Think about that. Poor me will sacrifice joy, growth, love, fulfillment, all to maintain its narrative. It's not that it won't see contradictory evidence, it cannot. Poor me doesn't just prefer its story, it needs it, craves it, will manufacture it if necessary. Because without the steady drip of defeat, of confirmation that yes, the world is against you, what would be left? Who would poor me be if not poor, if not perpetually wronged? And so poor me trudges on, seeing only what it's primed to see, feeling only what it believes it deserves to feel, always aching, yet perversely comforted by the familiarity of that ache. Someday, it thinks, gazing at happiness through reinforced glass, that could be me. Not realizing that as long as poor me holds the reins, someday will forever remain on the other side of that unbreachable window. So, at the end of this video, are you left with the bitter taste of, oh God, nothing's gonna ever work for me? Then there's an opportunity for you to go back and watch this video again and see the value in it, the discernment opportunities it provides, the prompts for self-awareness, for self-soothing and self-compassion. Because only those weapons will kill poor me. Stay tuned for the next video.